In the downswing, should your hips bump or turn? And the obvious answer is they do both. But what we need to do is both. A lot of players, when they're swinging the club, they overemphasize one or the other. Then they start to get themselves into trouble. Hi, I'm Peter Knight, and I've created this channel, Peter Knight Golf, to help you play the best golf you possibly can. And today we're going to look at what the hips are doing as far as that movement, that sliding or bumping movement goes, and the turning movement. We're going to look at how it works, and then some drills to actually help you achieve it correctly. With the movement, anytime we're turning the body or moving the body, not only are we working the hips, but also the feet are interacting with the ground. And the combination of these things is what helps to generate movement and speed in the golf swing. So that ideally, you don't have to do too much work with arms and hands. The smaller movements of the arms, smaller muscles of the arms and hands, if they're overactive, they can actually inhibit a nice flow of the golf swing, which is not what we want to be inhibiting. So any normal golf swing, when I set myself up, my hips are centered, and when I swing the club away from the ball, my hips are going to turn, and a reference point that I've got is that if I watch my right leg here, when I turn back to the top of the swing, my right leg should appear to stay on the same angle as it was at address. Now, of course, my hips have rotated, so it's not exactly true, but from watching where you are, as I go back, if I look at the angle with that represented with that shaft and my hips turn, we can see that it stayed pretty much the same. In the downswing, I want my left leg to become vertical, actually pretty early in the downswing. Now, from address to where that vertical line is not very far at all. Now, when I turn my hips in the backswing, because my hips have rotated, my left hip's further from that line, but even so, when I swing the club down, I've got to move forward a little bit, but not a huge amount as I swing the club down and through. So my reference points as I'm going back and through before we start looking at what the order is in the backswing, I want my hips to turn without sliding one way or the other. And in the downswing, I want my hips to move forward so that my front leg, my left leg for a right-handed golfer, is vertical and then turn around that point. It looks pretty easy and it's not a tricky movement, but getting it right when you've got everything else going on in the golf swing for some players can be quite tricky, particularly those players who are very hand and arm dominant during the swing. So let's have a look at how we can start to build this sensation. The first thing I want to do, particularly if I'm one of those players who's very hand or arm dominant during the swing, is to build up the feeling of what I'm doing with my lower body. So those reference that I sent through, that I mentioned before, just turning the hips back without sliding, moving forward and sliding again, I want to start to get the feeling of doing that and do it in isolation. So from here, I'm just rotating my hips. I've got my club as a checkpoint here, turn back, then I'm going to move forward. So that's the order of the movement. My hips are moving forward and then sliding. And the reason that they move forward first is that if I'm watching from this view here, if I swing the club back and turn my hips, it's likely that my arms and hands will follow. If I swing the club back and now get a little bit of a slide, even the sliding movement makes my arms want to just move down a little bit, almost drop. So from the top of the swing, my arms and hands are more likely to move on the correct path when I initiate that movement with that little bit of a slide. So once I've got the sensation, first of all, of doing it completely in isolation, then with a short swing, I'll just allow my arms and body to work back and through. Now I'm focusing really on what my lower body's doing. So I'm turning, getting that little bit of in the backswing, getting that little bit of a turn and slide in the downswing. But at the same time, my arms and hands are just reacting to that movement as I go back and through. So I'm not actually doing anything with arms and hands. It's like they're being moved by the rhythmic movement that I'm doing with my lower body. And I can even, with a lofted club, because it'll help to get the ball up in the air a little bit, make that little swing. And what I'm looking for is to feel that I'm creating that little movement almost completely from my lower body. And my monitoring is that, my checkpoint is that I'm trying to keep my arms and hands completely out of the motion. So I feel like it's my foot interaction with the ground and my movement with my body that's moving everything else. I mentioned hitting those little shots with a lofted club. This is with a 6-iron. When I hit this shot with this club, it just flies really low. So if you've got a lofted club, it'll fly a little bit higher. If you use a straight face club, you can still do the drill, but it'll just fly like really low and may hardly get off the ground. So once I've got that sensation with a shorter swing, a reasonably smooth but not overly slow swing, I can start to get the feel of how that motion I want that motion to develop. Then I might swing the club back to a point where, say, my shaft of my club and my left arm form a right angle, so my hands are at about chest height. And then I'm going to, again, move my hips first and then go through to roughly the same point on the other side of my body. So I've extended the range of the motion a little bit. And again, I'm still focused on trying to keep the activity out of arms and hands as I do that. So now I'm still focusing on that same movement there and letting that movement lead my arms and hands in the downswing so that I can still keep that movement quite smooth. Now, because my body is actually creating, or my lower body is creating most of the motion, it's actually quite easy to keep the club swinging on quite a nice path. Once I feel that I can swing the club and the downswing motion is mostly determined by what my body does, then I can put it into a full swing. So again, same thing, I feel like it's mostly my lower body that's doing the work as I go back and through. A good way to practice this is actually to do it where you're going up and down the swing length, swing speed scale, so you actually start to build the rhythm with different amounts of effort. Again, always monitoring, particularly if you're a player, like I said earlier, who uses hands and arms a lot, then it's really good to do a lot of the shorter stuff. Always monitoring whether or not there's a point in the swing that the hands and arms want to take over. Practicing that movement and having the feeling of your body moving correctly, that you're getting that combination of your body moving forward and turning, and having that direct the rest of the motion with your body and arms and the club is going to make a massive difference to your ability to hit good shots and control them without feeling like you've got to control everything with your hands. Your hands are always sensing what's going on. Your hands give you the awareness of where the club head is in space, but they don't have to do a whole lot of work. In fact, that can be quite disruptive to your golf swing. So practice the shorter swings, build them up, and then notice the improvements that you're going to get in your game because of it.